T minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. All three engines up and burning. 2, 1, 0, and liftoff.
Coach on Fire Radio.
Hey everyone, and welcome again to the Greatness Movement Podcast. I'm your host, Kenny Weiss. I'm a speaker, life coach, author, and founder of the Greatness Movement based here in Phoenix, where we guide you to becoming the greatest version of yourself. Well, you ever been cheated on? We all have. Have you cheated on other people? Most people have in some form, whether it's actually the act of it or thinking about it or emotionally. There are kind of many ways people cheat. Usually the people feel the most destructive is, the physical act of cheating. And it's devastating. So tonight I wanted to talk about, what some of the reasons are and how to overcome it. There's many reasons that we're drawn to cheating or we're even drawn to somebody who does cheat. And whether you've been through it yourself, I know a lot of people, they've been cheated on and they won't get back into relationships. It was too devastating. And because, as I say all the time, we have a culture that has a bias against becoming an expert in our pain, really. That's the societal bias. We're much more concerned about global warming and other things like that, which, okay, they might be important. But 30 years ago, or I guess more 40 years ago, they were saying the earth was going to freeze over. So we'll get into belief systems at the end here. But on a day-to-day basis, we worry about the silliest things. And for the most part, we choose not to go become an expert in the three things that determine our whole life history: parenting, relationships, and emotions. If you look at anybody's life, what do they talk about? Their kids, their relationship, how they feel about something. And yet most people will never do any work on any of those. They think it's a waste of money. They'll go on trips, they have money for everything else, but not to invest in themselves and learn about these things. They'll take a class to, we go to school for everything, but the three things that determine our whole life history, almost all of us refuse to go become an expert in those areas. Well, that's why I started the Greatness Movement. There's a fear against doing that. There's lots of reasons. I wrote about it in my book, but it shows up in every area of our life, the lack of information we have. It's funny, virtually every conversation I have with people, regardless of the topic, it always comes back to these issues, especially business. Like businesses, for the most part, refuse to hire me because I go too deep. They want the superficial, rah speaker, kind of the Grant Cardones of the world, It's all an adrenaline hit, which lasts about 24 to 72 hours, and then you're right back in that pit of self-destruction and misery. And that's what we all search for. These deeper topics people are afraid to deal with. And I started the Greatness Movement because I want that to flip. I want it to be our first impulse to go look at our imperfections and share them with the world. You know what's fascinating about it? What do we all love? What's our favorite thing? When an actress or an actor, a politician, an athlete, when somebody bears their soul and how imperfect they are. Like, think of it. You've all been in networking meetings. Anybody who tells you about how terrible their childhood was and how terrible their past was, we all go, wow, I really admire that person, right? Isn't that wonderful that they do that? But yet we won't do it ourselves. Like, it's fascinating to me. Every single time someone guts themselves and tells you about how awful their life story was and how they went and faced it, every single person, like literally every single person, admires them and holds them in esteem and says they're the greatest people, and oh, isn't that wonderful? And yet we won't do that ourselves. Like, doesn't that fascinate you? Are you a person who does that? You watch reality shows and see all these train wrecks, and you see them confessing to their sins, and you think, God, they're the greatest person in the world. That's usually why we vote for somebody, who spilled the most beans about themselves. It makes us like them. Yet we won't do it ourselves. Like, not hypocrisy is not the right word. I'm drawing a blank on the right word. The paradox of it all isn't lost on me. I was at a networking meeting, the one I go to every week, and a guy there, actually a client of mine, who's in one of my groups, and his childhood's horrific. I mean, he lived in a dresser drawer. That'll give you an idea. I don't have his permission to tell his story, so I'm not going to. But the abuse, it's living in trash cans, and the whole room, tears and commending him. And yet most of the people in there would never do the work like he's done. And they think he's wonderful and everything. That's fascinating to me. They're literally like, they've watched him change since he came in the group, started working with me, went to the groups and everything. They see his whole life, his business exploding, everything. And yet none of them will join not none of them. Almost all of them won't do the work. That's heartbreaking. Absolutely heartbreaking. Okay, so anyway, that's part of why I want to talk about cheating, where it really comes from. What is it all about? And why do we cheat? Why does this happen? Well, there are many reasons, and probably some I'm not going to mention, but they kind of, there may be different ways of saying the same thing. One of the biggest reasons is a lack of communication. Think about it. When you first start dating somebody, like, you can't stop talking to them usually, right? You text them all day, you send them pictures all day, you keep them updated in the goings on of your life, and you keep reaching for your phone or your email, just waiting for that connection to hear what's going on in their life. Well, as we spend more time with somebody, we don't do that anymore, right? We stop communicating. And some of that's healthy, because to be honest, that intense communication is also massive codependence and love addiction. So I'm not advocating it should be like that all day, every day. It's just because we don't know anything about codependence, people think that's love. The reason it's a problem is because we haven't done the work on relationships. When that starts to leave, we start to feel abandonment, all these problems, all these feelings come up, and we start to think our relationship is in trouble. Well, it's really our lack of emotional awareness and our lack of understanding of relationship dynamics and what true love looks like. It creates these problems. And so because we all start with tons of communication, because we are all massively codependent and love addicts and love avoidance, every one of you listening to this it's universal in the human condition. This is how we all pursue relationships. Nobody's immune from it. And if you feel ticked off or disagree with me, that tells me you're a love avoidant. That would be, love avoidance would go into massive denial and be angry at me. It's part of their power position and why they're a love avoidant. So, especially if you haven't done any of the research, that's another thing that happens is I get people who argue with me who've never done any research, and they just think I'm wrong just because I'm wrong. which proves how right I am and how much denial they're in, especially if they've read my book. It shows you that's part of the cycle and why they would do that. So at any rate, the communication starts to stop because all of a sudden we get into our kids, we get into work, the work pressures, our hobbies, TV. The bottom line is it becomes a choice. When we first started seeing each other, we would make a commitment to communicate on some level. And as we get more comfortable with each other, we stop communicating. Now, in a relationship where people are working on their stuff, it's very healthy for a relationship to be very, very quiet and at times have absolutely no communication. That's truly loving. You don't have to be in communication all day, every day to have a loving relationship. Actually, it's very healthy when you don't. But since all of us are codependents, that really triggers our trauma issues that are unaddressed. And that's what starts to create the impulse to cheat. All right. What I'm doing is I'm showing you how, communication when it stops, and then I'm going deeper. Because when you research most of the stuff, the things that are out there is they don't get to why communication, they would never mention codependence or love addiction or any of that. They just say, oh, lack of communication. We get busy and stop talking to each other, but they don't tell you why that happens and why that's such a big deal to us, and therefore why that sends us to cheating. So since we're all codependent and all of that, and the communication starts to stop, we act out. And so we look for that codependent spark with somebody new, okay? We want that intensity of communication like we had in the beginning. That's why usually, not always, but usually love addicts will cheat a lot because of that. They need that constant affirmation and attention, where a love avoidant, they like the quiet, because remember, love avoidants were smothered emotionally. And so they don't really like to communicate. Plus, if they communicate it, they lose their power. Like if they get in an argument and they could be told they're wrong, they don't want that. That's devastating to them. So love avoidants are much more okay with a lack of communication in the relationship. For them, that feels very safe, where for a love addict, they'll freak out. That was my issue when I was younger, is, man, I really struggled with that. So at any rate, because of the codependent dynamics and the love addiction dynamic, a lack of communication is a massive trigger for some people to act out and cheat. Now, another reason that makes us want to cheat is, in general, not always, but in general, men want more sex and women want more connection. Okay, that's historically been the dynamic. Men, by nature, have been created to, I don't know, created. It's been because we can change the human species into anything we want. All we have to do is start firing a new emotion. So to pigeonhole us and say this is just how men and women are isn't true. Look at how much society has changed, both men and women. We've just fired new emotions, created new belief systems, and so there's new structures. But at one point, well, that's not exactly fair. Men produce more testosterone. Men do instinctually, because of the makeup of, I guess you could say, the machine. It is more sexually driven, okay? While women tend to be more driven by emotions and connection. Although I'm seeing a massive shift in society in our attempt to bring power and equality to women, because we've never grown emotionally and never really addressed what was really going on in these dynamics. What women have done, they have become men. If you look at TV commercials, you look at movies, you look at everything. The societal message in all of them is exactly what it was 40 years ago when I grew up watching All in the Family and Archie and Edith. Archie treated his was it Archie? That name's not right. Yeah, Archie Bunker. Yeah. Archie treated Edith like dirt, ran all over her. She was completely useless. He'd sit in his chair and just boss her around. Well, watch commercials now. Watch sitcoms now. Watch movies now. That's what women do to men. Men are complete buffoons and idiots, like that car guru's commercial. It's a perfect example. There he is, trying to map everything out. Like, talk about humiliating a man. And men did this to women, so don't hear me wrong. Let me finish my point. But here he is, very kindly and studiously, he's researching, trying to find the best deal, trying to find the best thing for the family, right? He's being a leader as a man. He's taking the role of, it's my responsibility to find a new car for the family that puts us in the best position. And what happens? The woman comes in, grabs his phone, pushes 2 buttons, laughs at him, and walks out the door, leaving him completely castrated and humiliated. The whole commercial is meant to humiliate a man. And that's how every commercial is nowadays, every movie, every sitcom, all of it. You know, there's the old adage, happy wife, happy life. It's just reverse discrimination. And that's what breaks my heart, is in women's rightful attempt to gain equality, the model that they were shown by Steinem, Fonda, and all the other feminists was go become a man, right? Men have played a part in it too. Men said, look, honey, if you want to start acting, you want to start taking on a man's role, you need to act like a man. So men played a part in it. It's not just women. It's primarily women, female driven, but women have become men. And so I see this heavily when I talk to women. They really struggle emotionally, incredibly struggle, and being open and vulnerable, while men are becoming much more open, vulnerably, and emotionally. Women really struggle with denial, really struggle with getting help for their issues, and admitting that they need help. Men are becoming much more open to it. The whole societal dynamic, and especially the millennials, oh my God, those millennial boys have absolutely no idea how to stand up for themselves. The whole message they've been sent is there's a problem that you're a man. You can't ask for anything from a woman. You can't be assertive in any way, because if you are, you're abusive and you're a bad person. So younger women are getting really upset because those boys, they don't work. They play video games all day. They turn to the woman and go, what do you want? And the women are getting upset and going, would you please act like a man and make a choice? Like, just tell me what you want. Like, let's have a discussion. But the men won't. They're stuffing. Well, it's not so much that they're stuffing, it's that they are emotionally unaware of what they want. So, while historically men have wanted more sex and that's why they've cheated, and women have wanted more connection and that's why they have cheated, you're seeing that dynamic completely flip. Women, the numbers on women cheating are going through the roof. It's everybody now. So that's another reason people will cheat. A big reason is people don't feel important. Now, what makes somebody feel important? Well, you can talk about the 5 love languages. Is it quality time? Is it physical touch? Is it words of affirmation, acts of service, gifts? Everybody has, because of their childhood trauma, they all have certain needs. They want their partners. Because see, that's what people don't realize. Unless you've done a boatload of the emotional work and codependence work and learn about relationships, what people do is they pick their trauma partner. They pick somebody to relive the trauma they went through, the trauma they experienced in childhood. And so they pick a love language. Usually they'll have a love language of like physical touch and kind words. Those are their primary ones because those are the two things they didn't get in childhood. And so almost always they'll pick somebody who will then give them gifts and want to spend quality time with them. Absolutely. Their two least favorite things. And that's exactly what their parents did. They gave them gifts and hung out with them, but they wouldn't touch them. They wouldn't praise them. They were controlling, all these different things. So I did a whole podcast on the love languages and how the problem with, it's a great book, but the problem is really what it shows me is what trauma you suffered. Unless you've done a lot of work like this, what you're telling me is what your trauma basis is as a child. And you're wanting somebody to fill that hole for you because you haven't filled it yourself. But you'll most likely pick somebody who doesn't meet those needs. That's generally what happens. So if because of those dynamics, people start feeling they're not important. They're not getting their needs met. Their love languages are not being met, and they're heartbroken over that. And so what do? They start searching for somebody who will meet that need. So it's pretty obvious if you're looking to have sex or it depends what kind of way you're cheating. If you're looking to have physical intimacy outside the relationship, then most likely kind words and physical touch is lacking in your relationship and was lacking in childhood. And so you're using sex to fill that void. If your love language is quality time and acts of service, those are much more emotional connections. And so that's somebody who will probably have an emotional affair with somebody at work. They probably won't go through with the actual physical part, but they'll share intimate details. They'll go out to dinner and open up about themselves. They'll have a real intimate relationship with somebody. So none of these are absolutes. I'm trying to give you a basic idea. So if you've been cheated on, or if you are a cheater, you can look at these and go, wow, yeah, he's right. Yeah, that is how that plays out. Yeah, mom and dad wouldn't spend any time with me. So I really want someone who spend time with me, yet I picked this person who works 90 hours a week and is never around. Oh my God, no wonder I want to go have an affair. Okay. So it's not so much that your spouse or partner is the problem. It's that you pick somebody where you could relive that same abandonment. See, that's what I mean. The issue is you, it's not them. That's one central thing with cheating. Well, with any relationship problem, they're not the problem ever, ever, literally, ever. I can't stress that enough, especially if you're a woman. If you're a woman and you're having bad relationships, it is never him, ever. It's not possible. And I'm pissing a lot of you women off by saying that, I'm sure, but think about it. Think about it. For centuries, women have picked all relationships. They are in complete control. Men have always had to court and chase women. We never go on a date. We never get in a relationship unless a woman says yes, right? You get hit on how many times a week? How many times a month? How many times a year? Thousands. But you said yes to this one guy. Well, that's about you. You had 1,000 opportunities and you picked this one. Why did you want that in your life? And I can hear people going, well, it's not my fault. I didn't know he was that way. Well, the reason you didn't know he was that way is you haven't. Here's the next question. Have you become an expert in relationships? Have you become an expert in codependence? Have you become an expert in overcoming your childhood trauma? No. That's why you picked him. You don't have that information. That's why I started the greatness movement, is you're picking this to relive your trauma and you don't know why. You think he's the problem. Well, if you read my book and all these different things I always suggest, you go do the work, you'll stop picking this guy. You will literally no longer be attracted to him and that type. That's why if you have any relationship problems, especially in the case of women, you're the problem, not them. And so if you want a better relationship, go do the work. There's just no other way to say it. And I'm not, please don't hear me as putting you down or denigrating you or saying there's something wrong with you. This is a societal problem. It's bigger than you. It has nothing to do with you. This is about the human race and the human species, I guess, that for centuries we won't learn about this stuff. That's the problem. Instead of worrying about global warming and all that other stuff, or animals, or any of the other crazy stuff we worry about, let's change that dynamic. That's what will impact all the other things you're focusing on, all the pet projects you have. Fix how people relate to each other first. Everything comes out of that. Until you address that, you're wasting your time on all of these other political and social issues. Because even social issues, if you're in the ACLU, any of it, I don't care what it is, gay rights, trans rights, whatever it is, doesn't matter. You're wasting your time unless the whole society becomes an expert in all of these dynamics that I talk about. That's the first solution if you want to fix anything. Okay? All right. Another reason people will cheat is they have differences in sexual styles or preferences. Let's face it, most people don't even have that discussion. They don't want to tell somebody, we are so archaic when it comes to sex as a culture, and make it such a disgusting and bad thing. Something that gives life and creates the most happy reaction we ever have in our whole entire life. We have, mostly because of church. I'm not going to beat up on religion, but it's lots of things, not just religion, but for centuries we've made sex this bad thing. And so most people, again, they won't communicate. They have these things they're interested or want to explore, but they're afraid the other person will judge them, because we don't teach anything about how to express your needs and wants, how to be open and vulnerable. And so people lack the skills and tools. And so they don't tell their partner, wow, this is what I really like and want. And so they're miserable because they're not getting their needs met, but they don't know how to ask or share how to get their needs met. So instead, they go outside the relationship and start searching for somebody who will meet those needs. Again, gets back to the same thing. And this person over here is entrenched in certain sexual beliefs that they were raised with, of what's good, bad, or whatever, and which is archaic also. So it's both sides. This person may be more expressive or more exploratory. This person is much more rigid. And the rigid person is usually the one who's saying, no, 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 this is how sex should be. Like, they'll talk about sex, but it's only this way, right? Well, this person who wants to explore more, why would you open up to that? So they are both damaged or struggling. I don't know the right, I hate to say there's a problem with them. I'm drawing a blank on a more accurate term, because it's not that they're damaged or broken, it's they lack information. Both sides lack information, and they exercise that lack of information in polar opposite ways. And both are equally destructive. If somebody is unwilling to share their beliefs or their interests, and this person is entrenched in theirs, they're both struggling with the same issue. They just do it from polar opposite ways. And so one or both will look outside the relationship to cheat. A big reason people have affairs or cheat is they want to leave the relationship, but they don't know how to. This was me. I did this in my first marriage. She was abusive. I've said this before. We had 12 instances of intimacy in 10 years. So what I mean by an instance is physical touch, kind words, or any type of a sexual act. We had 12 of those in 10 years. And she was abusive, and I didn't have these tools. All the things I teach now, all the information I share here every week, I didn't have any of the information. I had no clue. I was just beginning to learn about it. The research that I would do about psychology and learning about human development was completely different. It had nothing to do with the relationships. And so I didn't know how to say no. I didn't know how to get out of the relationship. And so literally I created a situation where she would find out subconsciously. It was back when the internet started, and I remember getting online late at night when I knew she was awake, and I knew it would be suspicious if I was down in the office on the computer, but I went down there anyway. I completely set myself up and then didn't clear the history and things like that. So that was me. I could not protect myself. I needed to do something that was so horrific to her to get out of the relationship. It was the best I could do. I don't hate myself for it. I don't hate anyone for it or judge anyone for it. We can only do what we know. And since we don't teach anything about this, that was the best I could do. I had no other skills. And so while there are heavy consequences for that, and it damaged myself and my family and her, which I have deep remorse for, I've forgiven myself, because you can't blame yourself for not knowing how to do something. You just can't. You do have to suffer the consequences. You can't outrun those. But I'm not to blame for doing the best I could with what I knew at the time. Now that I know better, I can do better. And so I can tell somebody this doesn't work and I move on. I know how to do that now. But most people, again, they don't know how. Another reason people will cheat is they lack self-confidence. They need validation. Because we teach nothing about parenting or emotions, all parenting strips us of our self-esteem, even if our parents did take classes and did learn about it. They're human. They're going to do things that shame us and hurt us. They would do much less of it if we as a society decided it was the right thing to do to go learn about how to be a parent. But it strips us of our self-esteem, because the parenting model, especially right now with the millennials, the parenting model that they went through, they were suffocated emotionally. And their parents needed validation of what a good parent they were. So they'd rescue them. They overindulged them, the whole giving everyone a trophy. And, that really, I hate to bring politics into it, but that far left view, they confused what love is and thought that being nice is loving, and trying to make everybody feel good. Well, that's not realistic. There's a right and wrong way to go about it, and the way they went about it and the basic societal push that they pushed on parents is actually massively destroying. In the 50s and earlier, parents ruled with an iron fist, and that was horrific as well. And so the 60s, really, it's the 60s generation, the love generation, went the complete opposite. Oh, we got to love everybody. That's just, both sides are equally destructive. They just do it in polar opposite ways. And so whether you were raised by that more militaristic, condemning, 1950s parent, you were really beat up on a lot emotionally, so you're probably seeking validation. But if you're raised by a 60s parent, this new style of parenting, these millennials, they have no self-esteem. So the That's why they're on the internet and Instagram and Snapchat and all that. They're constantly in search of validation. And so that's why they would have an affair. Another reason people would look outside of a relationship to cheat is a fear of commitment. So where does that come from? Well, again, that's trauma-based. Fear, remember, is always one of three things: fear of rejection, fear of inadequacy, which means they don't think they have the skills, tools, or knowledge, or fear of powerlessness. Well, let's look at rejection. Because of the parenting style we've all been raised with, we all struggle with rejection. It's a lack of self-esteem. Nobody ever rejects us. It's not possible. They're just operating in their own dysfunction, their own trauma, and their own best interests. They're not doing it to get us. I'll talk about anger and people who cheat out of revenge, but it's still not about you. It's about them. So people have affairs or cheat because of their own lack of self-worth and self-esteem and their own fear of rejection. Inadequacy. We don't teach the skills, tools, or knowledge on how to have a relationship or deal with any of this. And so that creates a fear of commitment. Powerlessness, because we were raised with the inability to say no to our parents. We don't know how to say no. And so to get in a relationship creates a powerlessness. I will not put myself in a position where, this is the thought for somebody who fears commitment. I will not put myself in a position where I could lose that power because of the way I was raised. And I'm speaking as though somebody was raised and honestly, people aren't really thinking this unless they've done a boatload of personal work. They aren't even aware that this is why they're afraid of commitment. But what I'm letting you know is literally subconsciously, and if they ever became aware, this is what they would recognize, is because of that powerlessness that they grew up with. They refuse to put themselves in a place, so they take a power position of not committing, because then they don't have to get vulnerable, because they don't know how. Because of the first two fears, they'd lose themselves. And they were smothered so much as, well, it's not just smothering, it's also abandonment. There are many factors that create a fear of commitment. So that's a reason why people end up cheating. Now I'm going to talk about the anger or retribution. When people cheat because their partner did, and like I just brought up, they'd feel rejected. Well, they didn't reject you. But see, because of lack of everything I just said. So let's say your partner cheated on you, and so now you're going to get retribution. Well, what does that mean? You lack self-esteem, because remember what anger is and retribution is? Anger in any form at any time is fear. So if you're out pursuing retribution, that means your fear of rejection, which you lack self-esteem. You don't have the skills, tools, or knowledge to figure out why you pick somebody who would cheat on you, because you're responsible for that, not the cheater. You are responsible. You're not responsible or to blame for why they cheated. That's their issue. What you are responsible for is your attraction to somebody that hasn't done the personal work and doesn't have the same morals and values as you do and won't cheat. That's the skills, tools, and knowledge you're lacking and why you're afraid. And then the powerlessness. So you pick somebody who could allow you to live that powerlessness. All right. And so now you're going to go out in anger and you're going to get them back to get your power back. Well, in that moment, who are you rejecting? Not them. Has nothing to do with them. It's all about you. See, if you have an issue with your partner cheating, then that tells me your morals and values are, and your needs and wants are for fidelity and monogamy. So if you go out and cheat, who are you cheating on? You, not them. That's why cheating has nothing to do with the other person, even if it's in retribution, because you're not cheating on them. You're cheating on yourself and your own belief system. Like, you can't outrun this stuff. It's always us. It's never the other person. But that's one of the biggest reasons, again, because we don't teach anything about relationships or parenting or emotions. Most people that cheat out of anger or retribution think it's healthy and the other person deserves it. What they're really saying is, and that's literally what they'll say, yeah, well, they deserved it. Well, what I want you to do is flip that around to the opposite. Instead of they deserved it, what are they really saying? They're saying, I deserve this. Because look at it. That's how they believe. They believe they deserve to get cheated on. That's what they're really saying. If you ever hear somebody who cheats out of anger and they use the excuse, well, they deserved it, what they're actually saying to you is, I deserve it. It's what I talk about. It's the 3D movie. It's literally everyone's talking in the opposite. Like, it's so fascinating to me when you learn this stuff, how when people make these judgments, how they're literally telling you about themselves, not the other person. Because here's the point. Again, their morals and values are, it's not okay to cheat, right? And what are they doing? They're cheating. So they're cheating on themselves. So that tells me they feel I deserve to be cheated on. I deserve to cheat on myself because even I'm going to go cheat on myself. That's what they really mean. Okay. Another reason people will cheat out, have affairs or cheat is boredom, sense of adventure. Now, why would that come up? Well, most people in this world cannot stand boredom. They can't sit quiet. If you ask somebody to put their phone down for an hour, oh my God, they'd have a heart attack. Not turn on the TV, music, to literally sit and do nothing for an hour. I'd love to see somebody do a study on that. I bet you over 99% of the people on this planet cannot do it. They could not just sit in a chair in their backyard without any stimulus and without having to get up and do something, to literally just sit and observe the world around them. That's a byproduct of codependence, of trauma, of fear, all these different topics that I talk about in my book. I bring up that whole subject in my book. And that's, severe pain and trauma. That's why they're bored. They can't stand that feeling. Like for me, I had to have a lot of chaos in my life. And I finally figured out why. See, this is the value of doing the work. The reason I would cheat or pick people who would cheat on me is because of my mom's drinking. My mom would be sober 4 to 6 weeks, an amazing, wow, she was massively codependent and enmeshing, but that felt very loving and powerful as a kid. But then she'd be in a walking coma for 7 to 10 days. The house would be dead quiet. Dead quiet. So boredom would trigger a subconscious body and brain memory, because the inability to sit still is a body memory. You store your trauma in your body, and that's why you have to move. Like, I'm going crazy, I have to do something. Like, you hear these people, oh, I have to stay busy. That tells you how much trauma they've suffered in their life. Literally, if somebody says they have to be doing something all the time, like, that's a red flag for me on dating websites or whatever. Someone who says that, I don't go near them. That's too much trauma, and they're not even aware of it. I don't want that in my life. Unless there's something in their profile that says, I'm working on it. I realize, like, they speak, I can pick up that they know that that's, like, they've done enough research to know that the reason they can't sit still and they keep themselves so busy is because of their trauma history. If I see something like that, okay. But if it's not there, I run. Like, I'd end up being a therapist for them the rest of their life. They have way too much work to do. So, but anyway, that's why I couldn't be bored. It would drive me insane. And so one of the things I would do was cheat. So that's why people, that's another reason people step outside of a relationship. So if you think through all of these, what's the common thread with every single one of them? Every single one of them. The reason people cheat is a lack of emotional maturity and emotional tools. That's it. You can take all of these little subtle reasons and you could add in 20 more or justifications for cheating. They all boil down to the exact same thing. It's emotional immaturity. That's it. And so if you are a cheater or if you have been cheated on, there's only one answer. Go become an expert in your trauma. Go become an expert in relationships. Go become an expert in parenting. Go become an expert in what's going on with you emotionally. It's that simple. So, and once you turn towards it, you'll figure it out. But that's what's happening. Now, I want to give, for those of you who aren't quite ready to do that work, because a lot of people aren't, they want the superficial Band-Aid. So here's some things. One of the biggest things, because all of these are codependent dynamics and they really get down to the really two central things in codependence. It's really feeling like you're not important anymore. Like, think of all of the different reasons, anger, wrongs, a disparity in sexual interest or whatever. It all comes down to the same thing. I don't feel important. My needs aren't being met. And if you're not ready to look at yourself and why you refuse to learn how to meet your needs, and you want a stopgap, basically, look with your partner, look and see all the different things you're putting ahead of your partner. With most people, it's their kids. That's, like I said, that's the new parenting model, is obsession with our kids. We think it's kind and loving, so we do everything for them. We don't have date nights because we're helping them with their homework. We're helping them. We're volunteering at this project for them. We're doing everything for our kids. Well, when are you going to let your kids grow up and figure out how to do some of this on their own? The other thing you're doing, and this is what they don't even realize, is you are modeling for your kids how to have a horrific marriage. Let that sink in. For those of you mothers, it's usually mothers. It's not always. It's shifting, fathers too, but usually it's mothers who get obsessed with their kids and, oh my God, don't make me give up my kids and how much love I have for them. Pardon me, but gag me. It's not love, it's smothering. You need their attention. They don't need it from you, not to that level. And so your unwillingness to have date nights and special time with your husband teaches your kids how to have a terrible relationship. And if you care so much about your kids and want nothing but the best for them, why would you want to teach them how to have a horrible marriage and how not to put your spouse first and how not to learn to cultivate a kind and loving marriage? Like, that's probably going to tick off a lot of women who are suffocating their kids right now and never doing anything for their husband, and their husband's complaining. And vice versa. I'm not just beating up on women, men do it too. I'm just using one side of the dynamic as an example. But I guess I could take the gender out of it. I could change the pronouns and change it to it. Right? I don't even know how all that stuff works, and the transgender stuff, the you, he, she, none of it makes sense to me. And I don't know if it's right or wrong. I have no judgment on it. I don't understand it. So I'm not trying to disparage them. Honestly, I could care less. It's their life. But with everybody being so codependent and emotionally immature, it's like we have to have all these caveats to things so that we don't upset somebody because they have no skills or tools to handle their own emotions. And so they want to control speech and everything because they don't know how to do it for themselves. That's all any of that stuff is. All this new push for, there's so much talk about hate speech and everything. Really what it is people who lack the tools to govern their own emotions and just recognize when somebody's being judgmental and hateful. They're just talking about themselves. That's what's hysterical about it, is the people screaming to stop the hate speech. They do it with such hate. They're not talking about the other side. They're talking about themselves. It's so painfully obvious. The people who are regularly, trying to change. Anyway, different topic. But so the point is look in your life where you're not making your partner a priority. Okay? That's the first step. The second step is I want you to challenge your beliefs in every area of your life. Most of them are false. This is something I'm really doing with myself, is I've been watching a lot of history stuff lately because I'm trying to get deeper into why we all do what we do. And think about it, like I said earlier, in the 1970s, science thought the world was going to freeze over. We were headed for an ice age. Now, what did some of the people say? In 12 years, we're all going to be dead and underwater. It's just so hysterical. These belief systems people have, and the science is not irrefutable. It just depends which political party you believe in and what your agenda is. Look at the belief system of race, right? Thought it was perfectly okay to imprison people of a different color. What about gender? We thought it was perfectly okay to imprison women. Like, these were the belief systems. You think it's crazy, but go watch it and listen to the people talking back then. They literally think it is the most sane thing you could think, and society believed it. Here was another thing. Did you know it was like in the 50s and 60s, like 80% of the population smoked cigarettes? That was a belief system. It was societally, it showed you were part of society. Now look at it. Oh my God, you're a pariah. Look at all those belief systems. What about milk? In my lifetime, milk has switched like 20 times between being good for you and bad for you. What about this belief system? I wrote about this in my book and how denial works. In early medicine, it was a sign of how good of a doctor you were by how much blood and guts were on your apron. Literally, that was a sign of what a great doctor you were. They did not wash their hands. There was no antiseptic, anything. As I say, there's a story. There are several versions, but the conclusion is the same. All of that changed when, I can't say his name, a doctor started to surmise, wait a minute, all these women are dying in childbirth, and we're coming from working on these cadavers and all this stuff. We're infecting them with these, all these germs from dead people. The whole medical community and everybody said he's crazy. He's wrong. And think of how the world works. Like, now you're crazy. Pick the border issue. Whichever side you're on, you're crazy. Pick global warming. Whichever side you're on, you're crazy. Pick pot. Whichever side you're on, you're crazy. Pick any topic, right? But especially those entrenched ones. Like, I got attacked on Facebook this week because there were some people talking about stress and anxiety, and I give them the science behind where stress and anxiety come from, and they didn't want to hear it. They did not. They were so entrenched in their pills and their pot, they couldn't give them up. They had to hold on to them. They had to keep their victimhood. I have to be sick. Don't tell me that if I go deal with my emotions, I can fix this. No. You can't tell me that. I have to keep my belief. And this is what destroys relationships. I have to keep my belief. Anyway, the washing your hands. So finally, one version of the story is he cut off one of his fingers and stuffed it inside a woman giving birth, and she ended up dying. And that's what changed it all. So, but literally those were beliefs. You did not, as a doctor, you didn't clean yourself at all between working with any client. Well, look at now, my God, you go anywhere, you have to wash your hands. Talk about another crazy belief. I've never washed my hands. I eat food off the ground. I don't give a hoot. If you believe it will make you sick, it will make you sick. If you believe shaking hands or touching a cart that somebody else has touched or a doorknob or all that stuff, it will make you sick. I learned that. I talk about that in my book when I realized I'd been making myself sick and hurt as a kid to control my mom's drinking. And then there was a strep epidemic when I was playing junior hockey up in Canada. And I'll never forget, like, they were shutting down games. Like, teams were getting overrun with horrific strep throat. And I remember when it started, I sat there in the locker room. I'll never forget. I can see me looking at Kevin McGill across from me. And I said, not me, I'm not going to get it. Every single person in our management, our trainers, every player on the team got it, but me. I created a new belief system or a different belief system. If you want to have a better relationship, if you want to work on all of these reasons why people cheat, work on your belief system, challenge them, wake up every day and go, should I really believe this? Maybe you are very experimental sexually. Should you really believe that? What if you are very rigid sexually? Should you really believe that? Is that really working for you? Everything. Constantly be challenging your beliefs and opening yourself up to the possibility of change and growth. Do not get entrenched. Please. That's how we will change the world. That's what's keeping the world. All the stuff I talk about, business and everything, I am challenging their beliefs. That's why they push back against me. But that's the solution. Look at any massive change in this world. What did they do? Martin Luther King, you name it. They challenged societal beliefs. They were willing to go up against them. Do it with yourself on a daily basis. Challenge your beliefs. All right. Finally, as I've said over and over, if you want to work through the trauma of cheating, whether you were cheated on or you cheat, you have to grow emotionally. And I recommended her books repeatedly. You need to get Pia Mellody, not Melody Beattie, sorry. Her books on codependence, which everyone recommends, it's really junk. It's just about an alcoholic person. It doesn't go in to the near depth and the information you need that Pia Mellody does. And her book is Facing Codependence. The other book you have to get, you should never date or be in a relationship with anybody until you read Facing Love Addiction. Those two books, nobody should ever go on a single date until they read those. And finally, Intimacy Factor. That will teach you how to truly communicate, conflict resolution, everything. Those three books, you just, unless you know that information inside out, good luck having a wonderful relationship. They should be mandatory reading for probably high school seniors, college freshmen. They should be forced to take a class on those things. And our culture would change immeasurably. Finally, get my book. If you want to know why you keep picking these people, it's about you and the trauma you suffered. And you have to see how the cycle is operating in your life. So those are the solutions for you when it comes to cheating. If you want to find out why you cheat or why you pick people who cheat, those four books, Pia Mellody, Facing Codependence, Facing Love Addiction, and Intimacy Factor, and then my book, Your Journey to Success. All right, I'm going to wrap it up there. Thanks everybody for tuning in. If you have any topics, anything going on in your life you want to learn more about, you're interested in, please send me a private message here on Facebook or on YouTube. Please subscribe and share this show, both on Facebook and YouTube. Let's help as many people as possible. You can also send me a message to Kenny at thegreatnessmovement.com. If you're looking for solutions to personal growth and all of these topics that I talk about, join a greatness group. Just send me an email, I'll get you more information. Now, as I say to end every show, remember, when we judge, blame, criticize anybody or anything for any reason, all we're ever doing is judging, blaming, and criticizing ourselves, because we can't see anything in anybody else that's not operating in ourselves. Now that works in the opposite. When you see greatness in other people, well, that's because you have greatness in yourself. If you don't feel you're living in your greatness, or when you hear that, you're like, yeah, that's not me, well, then the greatness movement is for you. We need you. Send me an email at kenny@thegreatnessmovement.com. And whether it's working with you individually or getting you in a group or getting you the book, we'll help you find your greatness. Have a great night, everybody. I really appreciate you watching.
I can do anything. I can reach any goal today. I can do what I want. I can be what I want to be.
Coach on Fire Radio.